which I'm a part of, we're basically constructing a tour where we're gonna like have different checkpoints with different students at them, and at each checkpoint we're gonna give like a brief like history, what was added, or maybe if it was there the whole time, see if people remember, maybe give them some fun facts, keep them nice and fun. And that's it for the 125th anniversary committees. But then we have two additional, the Hall of Fame committee and the policy and handbook committee. The first one is the Hall of Fame committee. This will be basically run by Mr. Seibel with a lot of student representatives, both in council and out. Basically, the Hall of Fame will just be a place to recognize outstanding high school graduates, like for there's many things they could be outstanding for: athletics, academics, etc. And that's really just it's in the early stages right now, but they're going to work to it and hopefully have it in session by the end of the year. And then we have the policy and handbook committee. That committee will be reviewing like policies and rules and questions under the student handbook that might not be applicable. Maybe people have problem with it. They're going to go put it under review and maybe make some changes. I know dress code was a big problem before. That stuff is going to get looked at. And yeah, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Repeatedly, I am so impressed, not only with your presentations, but anytime any students from the district have stepped to the microphone to address the board. I'm just really blown away with your level of professionalism, your ability to communicate. I know that Lucas is going to go study law, and I think that's a great step for you because in the way you present, I could see you making legal arguments any day of the week. So I really appreciate the updates and the information, and thank you guys. So it's a good opportunity if you want to get out of here. Now it's time to go. So thank you. Just an update from me on a couple of things that are going on. First of all, obviously, spring athletics and the spring musical programs are all underway, off to a great start. I've been out on the fields and you know, just great seeing people in their happy place, enjoying you know, our facilities and the weather and competing in a positive way. It makes you feel good. Just another update. I know a letter was sent, but just re-emphasizing the fact that we will have a 5-day weekend for Memorial Day from Friday, May 26th through Tuesday, May 30th. They are the 2 days that were set aside that would have been school days had there been the usage of snow days earlier in the year. But since no snow days were used, those days come back to us in the form of a holiday over the course of that weekend. I have been trying to attend as many, if not all, the home and school meetings that occur within the district. And I just want to shout out to those folks that are engaged in our home and school endeavors, the work that is being done, the amount of time that's spent by our parents that are involved directly with those groups, and those parents who do work to support those groups. At the end analysis, do wonderful things and provide for our kids. And I really appreciate the community spirit in which Morristown displays itself as it relates to the way you support your individual schools. And then lastly, on this note, as a follow-up to some of the things that are going on with the municipality, I'm happy to report that we're making some real headway with the ability to potentially increase our policing on our buildings to as many as 3 officers for next school year. They would be in the form of a special class officer that was developed by the state of New Jersey some years ago called a SLEO 3, a special law enforcement officer. And essentially what they are, it's a ability for retired officers to re-enter the workforce as officers, once again, working for local municipalities, police departments, but specifically for policing in schools. So they are full-fledged officers that are retired. They will have vehicles. They will be, you know, armed and ready. And I think it's a major step in the right direction in these times that we live in to invite our police in to be a part of, you know, what's happening in our schools and to most importantly, help protect our children and give them a sense of security. And I think also equal and important to that, I think it's a great opportunity for our local municipality and our police department to interact on a positive way with our students to develop that that greater sense of community policing, that we're all there to, serve one another. And I think that that's an important aspect of it. So many kids are not really exposed to that. And I think it's important and educational for us to have that sense of community within our schools. With that, and speaking towards what it is that we're trying to develop more so and move towards in Washington, in Morristown, as a Freudian slip, in Morristown is this notion of creating an environment where all of our students and our teachers can experience the same things when they come through the district, that they can have a sense of fairness and treatment, that they believe as much as the next person that this is their school and this is where they belong. So as part of that process, there's self-analysis that's done. And in the case of the state, auditing is done. And they'll take a look at various things within the things that are happening in the school. And one of those areas, amongst many, is discipline, to determine whether or not any particular group of students seems to be getting, more of their fair share of discipline than other groups. Often it's a source of, gosh, I wish that didn't happen. And we really want to believe that we're doing right by every single student. But unless we're willing, sometimes to, pull the cover back or take the Band-Aid off and really take a look at what it is really happening through data and through other things, they're the only opportunities that you really can do an effective analysis in an attempt to grow. And sometimes that's painful. But I think that the opportunities that it presents are very positive. And in the end analysis, help to meet the goal, which is that every student that attends this school is going to have the same kind of experience. So on that note, Dr. Tate has put together a presentation tonight to speak specifically about an audit that was done just prior to the pandemic beginning, and that we're in the throes of completing work in that area. And we want to make sure that the community has a really strong sense of what that's all about and what it is that we're trying to do. So without further ado, I turn things over to Dr. Tate.
Thank you, Mr. Bollendorf. I appreciate that. And that's exactly what we're going to do right now. We're going to take a look at some data from the school years of 2017-18, 18-19, and 19-20. And data was collected by the state, and they conducted a special education audit. So the numbers that we're going to look at now have to do with special education students. I'm going to provide you with a 3-slide executive summary, and then we'll get deep into the data as we move forward. Can you move the video, rather, can you move the box, the picture, or, yeah. Okay, thank you. You may have to be on that through the slide, so thank you. Thank you. So as I said, this data looked at information from 2017-18, 18-19, and 19-20. The areas of focus were identification, placement, and discipline as they relate to racial subgroups. And again, we're speaking of students with IEPs, individual education plans. New Jersey Special Education Code and federal law regulate these areas that I mentioned. And disproportionality was found in 1 of 5 measures in the area of discipline. The audit finding is one important data point that impacts and informs the district's thinking about its approach to discipline. Can you move forward for me? There we go. Okay. So our current approach to student misconduct and discipline in the schools, really, each school strives to provide a safe and positive, welcoming learning environment for all of our students. That's what we strive to do. Students have opportunities to learn about appropriate school behaviors in class and through assemblies, and assemblies mostly at the secondary level. Generally, schools use a graduated system of consequences for rule violations, with an emphasis on prevention and intervention over punishment. School teams look to identify root causes of misbehavior in order to provide appropriate help for our students. And thanks to our counselors and teachers and child studies team members for helping us out with that. Ultimately, we want to provide a safe space for the kids where students can thrive, a place where they can learn and grow and be supported to do better next time. And we've spent a lot of time talking about a growth mindset, and that's what we're talking about here as well. So this special education audit really caused us to pause and thoughtfully look at how we're doing things. We're definitely committed to providing a safe, positive, welcoming learning environment for all. And our approach will continue to evolve as we understand our student needs better. So moving forward, moving forward, yeah, you're good. Schools will analyze and respond to trends in data. Additional methodologies, best practices, and behavior management will be incorporated to those things that we do already. And we will continue down this path of providing professional development in the areas of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I will say here that the district really has a great foundation in this area. As we've worked with an ad hoc committee of the board and looked at race and racism and had some really challenging and wonderful conversations with our teachers and our staff and our students on the topic. Likewise, the SEL committee at the high school has worked with the alumni group, Mirai, and really, again, had some great, wonderful conversations about how we can improve in these areas. Okay. Not sure. Okay. So we'll get more specific about the disproportionality in special education findings. So disproportionality occurs when students of any racial or ethnic subgroup are identified for special education, placed in a more restrictive setting, or disciplined at a markedly higher rate than their peers. Disproportionality is significant when an overrepresentation of a group exceeds a certain threshold. That threshold in New Jersey is a risk ratio of 3.0 or greater for 3 consecutive years. And let me be clear about what risk ratio means in this sense. Oop, went too far. Let me go back. All right. So generally, a risk ratio of 1.0 indicates that children from a given racial or ethnic group are no more or less likely than children from all other racial groups to experience a particular outcome. A risk ratio of 2.0 indicates that one group is twice as likely as all other children to experience that outcome. And a risk ratio of 3.0 indicates 3 times more likely, and so on and so on. Okay, so again, looking at identification, placement, and discipline. And the question that was asked for all of these topics in the boxes here was this: is any group identified, placed, or disciplined at a markedly higher rate than that of their peers? If you look at identification, they looked at the disability categories that we utilize when students get an IEP. So for instance, if you look at intellectual disability, they would take that and run statistical analyses to see if any one group was identified markedly higher than any other group there. Same holds true for placement. For placement, they looked at children who are educated outside of the classroom, the general education classroom, for 60% or more of the day. And also for students who receive their education in and out of district placement. In discipline, they look at 5 different areas. They look at out-of-school suspensions for 10 days or less, out-of-school suspensions for 10 days or more, in-school suspensions for the same, in and out for 10 days, in or out. They also look at the total number of disciplinary removals to see if any group is markedly higher than that of their peers. So in the area of identification, there was no disproportionality found. Same for placement, no disproportionality found. In discipline, one area of disproportionality was found, and that is the total number of disciplinary removals of Black students with disabilities. So what that means is that Black students with disabilities were 3 times or more likely to be suspended as compared to students with disabilities from all other races or ethnicities. Okay. Thank you. So because of that finding, there was a secondary audit that was conducted for the data from the 2020-2021 school year. And the state reached out to us and asked us for all sorts of information regarding discipline data for that year and policies and procedures and letters that we utilize when we were interacting with parents, letters that go home, informing parents of disciplinary action. We did receive a closeout letter in October of 2021, which confirmed that there were no additional findings and that we were not disproportionate for that particular year. However, because of the initial finding, the district has to utilize 15% of its IDEA grant allocations for comprehensive coordinated early intervening services, CCEIS, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And as a result of that finding, when we received it, the district initiated a discipline review committee to analyze the student data at each school. Now we'll take a deeper dive into that data that the state looked at. I wonder if there's any way we can move that down. Is there any way to move that top box or no? Yeah, thank you. You're gonna have to move it again, but so disproportionality finding, again, we're talking about total removals. Now, over those 3 years, there was an average of 98 Black students with IEPs. So 98 students was the average of those 3 years, 17-18, 18-19, and 19-20. Now, there were a total of 55 suspensions over those 3 years. So not the average, but total. So there may have been 18, 18, or 19, or whoever the numbers would break down. So we had a total of 55 suspensions. We look at, I can't hit that box again. There we go. Oh, a little too far. Go back. So where were the suspensions happening? At WAMS had 68% of those suspensions. The high school had 16%, and the upper elementary school had 16%. So what were the reasons for removals? When we took a look at the data, the number one situation that was occurring was some sort of physical altercation. So some sort of fight, some sort of hitting, that carried 35% of those suspensions. Inappropriate conduct outside the classroom. So whatever type of behavior was happening, 20% of the time, there was just 20% of suspensions came from outside of the classroom. Those were things in there that were, throwing food in the cafeteria, or perhaps, talking back to a teacher outside or in recess. Some issues on the bus as well. Disruption in class is a disruption in class. So things that happened inside the classroom. Social media posts or utilizing your phone in school or some other inappropriate use of social media. Theft also, that number I believe is 9%. Stealing from another student or the school. And also some smaller categories that I put together: academic dishonesty, vaping, and no-shows, meaning you don't show up for a detention, so you get a suspension, or however that's built in like that. An interesting point. There we go. A little too far. Let me go back. Back one. Thank you. An interesting point here. If you look at this line here, okay, that's fine. So less than 20 students make up the majority of the suspensions. So 84% of the suspensions come from less than 20 students, which means that we have students there who have multiple infractions. Some, had 3 in a year, some had several across the years. So it's just an interesting point to take note of. So the comparison is made with all students who are not Black who have IEPs. That's how the state finds disproportionality. So this is the comparison total removals of all students with IEPs. Over those 3 years, there was an average of 750 non-Black students with IEPs. The total suspensions was 152 over those 3 years. The breakdown of the schools, see it there. And what were the removals? Why? What happened? What were the suspensions for? Very similar pie charts here. Inappropriate conduct outside the classroom, a few percentage points higher. Physical altercation, 28%. Disruption in class, 22%, almost exactly the same. Vaping, smoking, theft, and then smaller categories of academic dishonesty, social media, and no-shows. Similar, there were 30 students here. 30 students make up the majority of the suspensions in this category, meaning that 30 students were had repeat offenses, whatever they may have been over those 3 years. So next steps, identifying and addressing the issues. So the district discipline committee and administrative teams analyzed the data that I just showed you. And we had some questions. We asked how our practices and procedures were implemented in each case. We had the principals and assistant principals with us. What needed to change and how we address discipline, how to better engage and intervene with students having difficulties in school. And we talked a lot about how do we intervene early as a preventative measure, as an upstream measure, and what additional supports can we provide to students who have repeat infractions. We examined WAM's discipline committee, which took place, I think Mr. Keith is here, during the 18-19 school year, because they examined their own data. And if you notice, they had a large chunk of the suspensions during on the first pie chart. They examined their own data and decided to make some changes with their handbooks and other things that they were doing. So we spoke to Mr. Keith in that committee. We put a behavior specialist and a school psychologist to consult on our I teams and discipline committees, and they worked with individual students on cases involving discipline. We identified professional development for teachers and administrators and support staff that focused on implicit bias, on developing classroom and school cultures that foster a sense of belonging, and use of both instructional and behavioral management strategies that are responsive and inclusive. So where are we now? You're going to be moving this a lot now. So where are we now, and what's in progress and what's happening? So, and I'll look at policy and practice, student and family engagement, and professional development. So one of the main things that we are doing is developing school-based behavior teams to take a close look at their own data in their own individual schools. And it's connected to a review of the handbooks and a review of how code of conduct is implemented. And we'll use Mr. Keith as our example. That is all connected to professional development and understanding key concepts in behavior management and relationship building for all staff, including our non-certificated staff. One important point that came up for us was when we were working with our behavior specialist is that the behavior specialist brought up this point, that if you do not receive any professional development or learn anything about discipline, you tend to discipline the way you were disciplined. So if you don't receive, any information or guidance on that, you discipline the way that you were disciplined when you were younger, either through your parents or through your schooling. So it's really, really important for the district to make sure that we're providing the latest and the greatest as far as professional development is concerned for all of our teachers. To that end, equity and discipline professional development has just occurred for our assistant principals, and we're going to continue that through the rest of this year. Take a look at, let's see if I can get on here, involvement of case manager and this counselor from the get-go. As soon as there's an issue, we want to make sure we have these people involved and we have their hands on the situation. We want to make sure that also administrative sharing of student history during transition years occurs within and between schools. We do a great job of that with our teachers, with our counselors, with our case managers. We also do it administratively as well. We want to make sure that that is a box that gets checked with every single student. Just something else I can highlight here. We're working on now, parent outreach, utilizing social work to support parents in need through a referral system, looking at a parent academy, which we've tried before, and we're looking at a couple different ways that we can go about that, and community outreach. We want to make sure that our parents feel that they are being heard and provide students with voice as well. And lastly, on this slide, what I want to mention is we will continue with implicit bias training and trauma-informed approaches. This here, and ACEs, if you're familiar, our district mental health professional brought this to our attention, that she was working with, and we brought that on during the pandemic, by the way. But what she had noticed is that she was working with more and more kids who had a trauma background. And it is very important for us to provide the appropriate professional development for our staff to work with these kids. So that is also connected here as well. And lastly, increased efforts to hire a more diverse teaching staff. And that is something that we've had a goal now for a few years. Okay, so summary. Well, as I said at the beginning, I do believe that Morristown has a solid foundation from which to build here. We've done a lot of work in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the teachers have had very challenging conversations with themselves, and we're better for that now. So again, back to providing a safe, positive, welcoming environment for all. School-based teams are going to analyze their data. We're going to incorporate additional methodologies, professional development for our teachers, administrators. We will continue to provide PD in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion, provide upstream measures for students in need, and this one there, development of family engagement and parent outreach opportunities. Okay. So that is the presentation. Mr. Bolendoof, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks very much. I think it's important for folks listening and watching at home. It's really important to kind of put this into significant perspective. School discipline is part of education. Having kids trip and fall and having them learn positive lessons from that experience is part of the growth and development of children. It's how we go about teaching that lesson and ensuring that discipline is in fact educational in and of itself. So there's a lot of new mindsets. There was a day and time when a child got in trouble and you suspended from school, that was supported in home in such a way that that child is unlikely to repeat that behavior. We live in a different world today, and it's important that we don't disengage from our students, which is part of the reason why these audits focus, very intensely on exclusion from school. And it's a difficult challenge because sometimes behaviors are going to call for that exclusion. I think it's about fine tuning. I think it's about utilizing methodologies like restorative practice, which could be more enhanced, but it's also a question of perspective in terms of how we as educators and we as a community look to raise our kids in such a way that those very important life lessons are in fact being learned and learned in a positive way that doesn't disenfranchise them from school, does not disenfranchise them from the community, and that we utilize those moments when they will make mistakes, which will always happen more in middle school. All right, that's very important just in terms of growth and development of kids, that we're utilizing that in a positive way. And I think that that's really what the focus has to be. And sometimes audits like this remind you of that, even though the attempt is always there, that the intentions of our people in our schools has always been one to serve our children and to help them. But now I think that this is an issue that transcends beyond the borders of Morristown. And there's a shift in terms of how do we do this better? And an audit like this helps us get there more quickly. It forces districts to provide the necessary training that otherwise might not be as intense as it should be. And I want to commend this district for the work that's already been done as it relates to this. And it should be noted that you're no longer out of compliance with disproportionality. And that means that you've been stepping in the right direction, and that's a good thing. And so the work that the administration, at the board, the staff, and the community has already engaged in, whether it's been conscious or not, is to be commended. And I appreciate Dr. Tate, you putting this together and really spelling it out for our community tonight. So thank you.
Thanks, Joe. And thank you, Dr. Tate, Dr. Benton, and everyone else that was involved in putting the presentation together. I know it's been a tremendous amount of work over a long period of time. And this was a very helpful presentation for us to hear and for the community to hear as well. And, you know, I echo everything that Mr. Bollendorf had said, and we are continually striving to get better. And that obviously involves self-reflection. And in this instance, self-reflection that can lead to uncomfortable conversations and discussions, but that are necessary. And I'm very happy to see the work that has been done and that will continue to be done in the district. And I think, Dr. Tate, you had mentioned the board's prior committee that examined equity and inclusion issues, and that ad hoc committee no longer exists. However, our commitment as a board was to continue those conversations in our individual committees. And I think we've been doing that. And I would just remind the committee chairs that everything that we're doing should have an eye towards these issues. I know last year, the F&O committee specifically examined our hiring practices and what we are doing to improve the demographics and the diversity of our staff. And so I think this is an opportunity to remind our committees that this work, even though the ad hoc committee is no longer in existence, is something that should be resonated through all of our committees, and because it's obviously a very important issue. So thank you again for all the work that went into it. And I guess I'll open it up if there are any questions from the board members.
I just have a couple questions, Dr. Tate. You mentioned the behavioral specialist and the school psychologist. I'm not sure if it was an and or an or, but I'm just curious, and I'm not sure you really have this number off the top of your head, but about how many students is that professional trying to evaluate or address? You mentioned them in terms of like the IT meetings, and I'm just kind of trying to wrap my head around that ratio. And then my only other question is the DEI PD that you said will be offered. Is that something like as a result of this, or in general, that all teachers and staff will be taking, or is that optional? Or
so I'll take the PD question first before Dave answers the question about the behavioral specialist. So the DEI work that has been happening even predates, you know, my time being here. This was something that was already in the works. And as I've said to the board before, I think throughout the pandemic, it rose, you know, to attention, both from things like the George Floyd protests that happened, as well as all of the traumas and focus on social emotional learning that came out of the pandemic. And I think internally, as Dave mentioned, you know, teachers, staff, and administration took a lot of self-reflection time to identify that these were in-house things that we needed to address. And so really, we've been doing this now for the past 4 to 5 years, but with a focus specifically in 2021, as I presented to the curriculum committee. The state also included diversity and inclusion standards, LGBTQ and people with disabilities standards, history and contributions, as well as the history and contributions of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. So there's also been several standards, and we're making an adjustment as also for our curriculum. And so all of those things together have required very intensive professional development. So all teachers are getting perhaps not the exact same professional development, but over each professional development opportunity that we have, we're offering across the board what is appropriate, for instance, at different levels. So for instance, there are either SEL or diversity and inclusion committees at UES, WAMS, and the high school that are all identifying professional development opportunities that are appropriate for the needs of those buildings. And then we're additionally offering broader options across, like the Anti-Defamation League we're looking to offer, ESL, because we have a growing ESL population. So those are things that teachers K-12 will have access to. Again, not necessarily there. That said, we are addressing these things in big ways. So for last year, as part of our teaching and learning address, we talked about how learning partnerships and the way that we deliver our instruction in the classroom is part of ensuring equitable outcomes. So that was part of my teaching and learning address that, we all sat in the auditorium and it was delivered to everyone. So.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Benton. And as far as the district-wide, there was like a triangulation. We had a district-wide district-wide mental health professional, we had a behavior specialist, and we had a school psychologist that worked in the various buildings, and they worked through a referral system. So they provided consultation to administration or the committee that was working on the discipline data, and also took on individual cases. So it varied. It depended, and I will say that the majority of individual cases where they were working with individual students happened at the high school and WAMS. So.
Okay, unless there's any other comments or questions, we will move on to our board committee reports. Up first is communications, and I can say in Jill's absence that the communications committee did not meet this month. I think we were scheduled to meet later this week, so look for an update at our next board meeting with respect to that committee. Lauren, could you give us an update from curriculum, please?
Sure. Curriculum met April 6th. In attendance was Dr. Benton, Joe Wallendorf, Mick Weeks, Cheryl McCopolis, Danielle Miller, and myself. We reviewed the field trips that were taken throughout the district in the months of March and April. It was 4 total in each month. That was informational only. We then had a discussion about the pros and the cons of AI, with a little bit of focus on the ChatGPT within the school district. That also was informational only. The goal, Dr. Benton stated, was that the buildings would be presenting guidelines in place for the start of the school year for how AI would be used within the buildings. Then we discussed the summer curriculum writing summaries. That will be on for board approval in the June meeting, as far as the projected hours and staff names. And then we had a brief preview discussion of the summer reading selections for the UES and WAMS. That'll be on May's agenda. And we just had an initial discussion that took place about what is really the purpose and the process of selecting the summer reading books. And that also was informational only.
Great, thank you. I appreciate the committee looking at the AI issues, the generative AI and ChatGPT and similar types of technology are things that in my world, I'm in the legal field, is top of mind. Just within the last 60 days, it has exploded. And, for those that are not necessarily familiar with it, it is technology that is going to change the world. These programs essentially crank out work product and papers that would take hours, if not days, if not weeks, if not months, in matter of seconds or minutes. It is extremely smart technology, and I think we have to be, I think the district should be at a minimum curious about its impact on our schools and how it is used by students and educators, because it's there's obvious benefits to it and there's obvious detriments to it. I mean, it's certainly, I've demoed it, and there is the absence of learning when you ask these things to do things. So I'm glad that it's something that's being discussed. And I think it's something that we should continuously be examining. And there, as I said, many predict that this is world-changing technology that we need to understand how to harness and regulate. So thanks for the update. I don't know if there are any other questions or comments for Lauren about curriculum. Okay. Hearing none, moving on to finance and operations. Mr. Weeks.
Sure. Thank you. So the Finance and Operations Committee met on April 4th. In attendance, in addition to myself, Ms. Makopoulos, Ms. Morano, and Mrs. Miller. Also, administration, we had Joe Bollendorf, James Heiser, Dr. Benton, and Jeff Ary. So this actually was a lighter agenda, fortunately. It's probably the calm before the storm though, right? So we didn't have any action items, but we did do an overview and discussion of the 2023 budget, got an update from Mr. Heiser on where that was. As of the time of that meeting, the county had reviewed our budget. The county superintendent hadn't yet, but should soon. I assume that's all been done now since we'll be voting on that tonight. We talked about our transportation contracts. And we have those athletic route bids. At the time, we could be on the agenda for April. It did make the agenda for April, so that's good. And we talked about the renewals that we had pending and one that had not, but we were still working with them. We spent a considerable amount of time learning about the difference between rooftop ventilation units and univents, but all in the service of understanding what we need to do to make sure that we have effective HVAC systems, and that we're also being efficient and effective in using funding opportunities to help us keep those systems either in good operation or replaced on a regular basis. So we're looking at a ROD grant opportunity that the state will help us fund the replacement of that. And so we discussed that. And then there was more probably that if anybody would like more information about that, just talk to James. Let's see. We moved on. The district is going through a process of reviewing and updating all the job descriptions to have a common format. Mr. Bollendorf is going to work with cabinet to go through all of that and bring that back to the committee at a future date. And then we ended up discussing how the business administration office handles funds from booster clubs and the relationship with the policy discussions that are going on currently. So that's what I have for that. Are there any questions or comments? Did I miss anything? All right. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mick. Claudine, would you mind giving us an update on policy?
Well, so we met on April 18th. It was myself, Melissa Curro-Burns, Jill Fallows-Macaluso, and our president, Mark Villanueva. With the administration was Mr. Bollendorf and Dr. Benton. So you'll see something, I got a couple of emails. You'll see something on the agenda. We're putting up for first reading 2 regulations versus a policy, which we don't do often. There are 2 mandatory regulations on the list. One is for compensatory special education and one is for lead testing of water in schools. So we currently have policies in place, but these are regulations. So nothing new is happening, just laying out the process in which the administration needs to follow to comply with the policy. The third policy on the policy on first reading, other than the 2 regs, have to do with just the language change related to English as a second language. The terminology is now multilingual learners, so it's ML. And that pretty much was the change throughout that existing policy. And again, it's mandatory from the state that we do that. So those are first reading. We have nothing on second reading this time. And we have 1 proposed policy for abolishment. And that has to do with more of a duplicating policy on public relations and communications. It's recommended from Strauss Esme that we consolidate in a sense. So 9100, which is concepts and roles in community relations and goals and objectives, is being eliminated because we have 9120 in place, which is our public relations program policy. We're going to be doing a review of policies so that we can see any of these overlapping policies and make sure that they're still current. This just happens to be one that was brought to our attention from Strauss Esme. Because the communications committee, and Jill's not here, the communication committee is really reviewing our entire communications program. I've asked from the policy committee through the president for communications committee to look at 9120, the one that's going to remain in place, make sure it serves the purpose that it needs to do and that it matches whatever changes that we're making to communications to better communicate with the district and students, staff, parents, otherwise. So that's it on formal action. Items for discussion, kind of overlapping. Mr. Bollendorf had talked about some activities that he had done with policy in his previous district. And I think Mr. Volpe and Dr. Benton had started that process, and just looking at all of our policies generally, making sure that they're current, making sure that they're relevant, and also making sure they're distributed, disseminated, and being followed. So, he's discussing doing a comprehensive review of all of our policies and putting particular attention to areas related to discipline, as we've kind of discussed. And also, I think a longstanding interest is looking at our drug policies and illegal substance policies, making sure they're current and relevant. So I think this will be helpful. This is something we've hoped for. So I hope, we'll be able to probably do some summer work there at some point. And again, there's been continued discussions, and hopefully by next meeting, we'll have some maybe policies on first reading to address our ongoing review of the boosters and school community clubs and parent organizations.
Great. Thanks, Claudine. Anybody have any questions for Claudine? Okay. Does anyone have an update for any off-board committee work?
I do. I'll go. I'll be brief. Even though I didn't attend, I wasn't able to attend the Rec Advisory Committee meeting because we were here having a special meeting. I did call and get an update. The primary thing they wanted to share with the board was their appreciation and acknowledgement of the partnership between the rec department and the school system, and that the rec department this summer will be offering many activities in conjunction with well, not necessarily in conjunction with the district, but using district facilities. So there's the South Valley has a preschool program for 4 and 5 year olds. Baker has the K through 6. Baker and Roberts both have a K through 6 program. And the high school auditorium and choral room is going to be used for a children's theater program. And then the UES will be used for the special needs program. All these programs run roughly from end of June, beginning of July through the end of July. And just they wanted to express that they're appreciative that we're able to work this out and provide these resources for the children in our town over the summer. So while they may not be doing the specific learning that they're doing in the school year, they'll still be in our schools over the summer.
Great.
I just wanted to highlight that on May 13th, that is a Saturday, New Jersey School Boards is holding its semi-annual delegate assembly. I am the voting member for the town, the board, but we haven't had the official agenda come out yet. I'll send that out when I get it. But anyone who does want to attend, you do have to pre-register, but you're more than welcome to attend.
I had an update. The next speak meeting, which is a special education advisory council, is this Thursday, the 27th, in the Star Center at the high school at 9:30 in the morning. And I did want to mention that this Saturday is Mission Voice 5K. And this is really primarily organized and run by the O'Donnell family in town. It's held at Strawbridge Lake Park. Race starts at 9. Pick up your packets at 8. If you haven't registered, you can register that day. And if you don't want to run or walk and can find somebody who is, there's always an opportunity to donate. The proceeds benefit the Parks and Rec programs for children with special needs. They actually offer quite a few programs. One includes summer camp, and they coordinate with our ESY program at the school. And then a really phenomenal program. It's called Smash Social Meeting After School Hours. And that is something that they had to actually cut, unfortunately, for part of this year because they didn't have the funds. And so all of the proceeds from this race will go to benefit those opportunities for our special needs kids in town. So 9 a.m. Get your running shoes on.
All right. Anyone else? All right. Technically not an off-board committee report, but I did get an email today from a member of the project graduation committee that partners with the MEF, Morristown Education Foundation, to raise funds for project graduation for our seniors, as well as some sweat equity for anybody that's interested in helping facilitate project graduation that evening. They're always looking for volunteers, as well as some donations. So I don't have the website at hand. I'm sure if you Googled it, you can find it, but it's the MEF website to make a donation for project graduation, which is an awesome program for our seniors to kind of give them one last night together. It's a huge success year in and year out with the dedication of everybody that's involved in it. So I just wanted to mention that. Next is our first public comment section on agenda items. The ground rules are set forth in the agenda. So if anybody has any comment on items listed in the agenda, please take the microphone now. Right after I make that motion. Could we please, could I have a motion to open public comment?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
This point, if you have any comment on agenda items, you could take the microphone.
I have a very quick comment. Elizabeth Pollard, 64 Brooks Road. It's peripherally involved based on the presentation that I've just seen, Dr. Benton. So just in light of the presentation and in support of just the well-being of our community, I'd like to encourage you to consider reinstituting your DEI committee. I think you mentioned it was an ad hoc committee, and it was, for some reason, I'm not sure why you're not meeting anymore, but just to consider reestablishing that and making it permanent as opposed to ad hoc. Thanks.
Any other public comment?
Lisa Trapani. This isn't an agenda item, but you mentioned the ad hoc committee in the beginning, Mark. Right, okay. So I just want to say thank you, one, for forming it. Two, if you're interested in community members who are also staff members to serve, I know there are at least 2 or 3 who'd be willing to be a part of that and, you know, do leg work and participate. So I'm going to put that out there. So when you do form that, please let me know.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate the offer, and it's certainly, this is we'll be examining huge issues that impact everybody, not only in the district, but in town. So appreciate that, Mr. Pani. Any other public comment? Okay, then can I get a motion to close?
So second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I got no, normally we don't discuss, but I was smiling when you spoke, Mrs. Pollard, right? Yeah, things will be brought to the board on that account. We have a staff member on cabinet that has that role as part of their responsibility, and the formation of a broader based committee that would be more of an administrative committee, not a board committee, although board members would be involved, but it involved community members, staff, students, is something that we'll be bringing forward to committees for the board and get their blessing to move forward with that. But I agree wholeheartedly with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is the public hearing on the 2023 to 2024 proposed budget. May I please get a motion to open the public hearing on the budget? Any comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any noes or abstentions? Okay, at this point, we will open the microphone for any comments with respect to the proposed budget that's listed as item 9 in our agenda. And hearing no comments, may I get a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Item number 9 is the adoption of the final budget. May I please get a motion for approval of the budget?
So moved. So moved.
Second.
Any comments or questions about the budget? Right, I'll just again reiterate the thanks to everyone involved in putting the budget together. It's every year after year, it's a massive undertaking, and appreciate all the work that went into it again this year. All in favor?
Roll call.
Oh, of course.
Mrs. Arcaro Burns,
Yes.
Mrs. Fowles Macaluso, Dr. Myatt,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Morano,
Yes.
Ms. Romano,
Yes.
Mr. Weeks,
Yes.
Mrs. McCopolis,
Yes.
Mr. Villanueva.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, James. Next up, item number 10, reports to the board. May I please get a motion for approval of items 1 through 5 set forth in item 10? Any comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Nays or any abstentions? All right. Item 11, the recommendations of the superintendent. May I please get a motion for approval of items 1 and 2, which relate to policies and procedures? Any comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Noes or abstentions? Passes. Item 11B, educational program. May I please get a motion for approval of items 1 and 2 set forth in the agenda? Any comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any noes or abstentions? Letter C, relating to finance and business issues. May I please get a motion for approval of items 1 through 9? Any comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Noes or abstentions? Carries. Thank you. Letter D, employee relations. May I please get a motion for the items set forth in numbers 1 through 19? Any comments or questions? This is a roll. Is this roll call? Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Arcaro Burns,
Yes.
Mrs. Fowles Macaluso, Dr. Myatt,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Morano,
Yes.
Ms. Romano,
Yes.
Mr. Weeks,
Yes.
Mrs. McCopolis,
Yes.
Mr. Villanueva.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 12, relating to suspensions and the superintendent's HIB report. May I please get a motion for approval of item 12? Any comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Noes or abstentions? Thank you. Item 13 is for information only. It includes our enrollment, which is ticking up, not surprisingly, to closer to pre-pandemic levels. Is there any old business? Any new business? Okay, and we will move on to our second public comment section that is for public comment related to anything on or off the agenda. May I please get a motion to open public comment?
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. At this time, if anybody has any public comment related to items on or off the agenda, you may take the microphone for a 3-minute comment. And the rules are set forth in the agenda.
Hi, I'm Carol Herb, and I'm the library media specialist at the UES. We would like to recognize all of the teachers and staff who helped to make the UES Book Fair Family Night a success. The students in Ms. Pasquini and Ms. McCluskey's art classes created beautiful artwork inspired by our school musical, Seussical Jr., that lined the hallway walls and as families came through our building that evening. Our play students, under the guidance and leadership of our staff in the areas of direction, makeup, costumes, set creation, lights and sound, singing, and choreography, provided entertainment by doing a special performance of Seussical Jr. We especially would like to recognize Mrs. Rogers and her challenge students who organized and executed our first ever multicultural event during that night. There was delicious food, talented dancers, and posters providing a wonderful multicultural experience for all who attended. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Christian Hine. I teach here at WAMS. I'm here to talk about the Spirit Week that WAMS staff organized last week of March. We bought supplies, prepared door decorating, which was a blast. It was pretty cool. Dressed up for each day to keep up with the enthusiasm of the week. I had on many wonderful outfits. We had some great doors, some great outfits, a whole lot of fun. We ended the week with a pep rally at the high school where staff took turns participating in events and cheering on their students. It was really a great week. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, my name's Cindy Honeyford. I'm a teacher at WAMS here. I want to thank the Baker staff, especially. I have a sweet spot for them because all three of my daughters started there and finished all through the system. But the second graders at Baker performed a wonderful spring concert for the school and families on March 31st under the direction of music teacher Kristen Zaranin. They sang songs, used kazoos, performed choreography and sign language, all about the arrival of spring. They even surprised the audience at the end with the use of confetti cannons. They look great wearing matching t-shirts designed by computer teacher Mark Ambriosino. The concert was a huge success. April is School Library Month. We want to give a big shout out to our district library and media specialists, Ann Poole, Mary Sakavich, Carol Erb, Amy Miley, Ann Ferrugia, and Susan Bernardi. They keep our students reading and our staff up to date with the newest books and tech tips. Challenge Innovation Lab students have a great time solving problems. First, they observed an experiment using mason jars and colored water to learn about capillary action. They then created their own experiments using scientific process. Our budding scientists showed a lot of grit and creativity. Their final problem for each was to build an elevated structure for a wiggly-eyed fluff ball named Harry. They could only use the provided materials. We are happy to report that the structures were innovative and that each Harry had elevated perch needed. Ms. Bartolini's second grade students learned about the Japanese form of poetry called haiku. Each student counted out 17 syllables and created their own nature-inspired poem.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Tim Hurley. I teach math at the high school. Recently, the high school choir received an exciting grant to be masterclass by the Chamber Ensemble Variant 6. This past Wednesday, April 19th, the group came to the high school. They performed for the students, they masterclassed them and held a Q&A session. It was a great program for the students, and a shout out to Kayla Johnston, the choir teacher, who was able to make this happen and provide that for the students.
Thank you.
Of course, like I'm short. I've got it. I'm Maureen Iannucci. I'm the counselor at South Valley, and I'm just here really to talk about our beautiful garden at South Valley. One of our second grade teachers is working really, really hard at maintaining that with the help of the other teachers on staff. It's a beautiful place where I do a lot of my counseling. The classes go out there to read. Most recently, our third graders released their butterflies in the garden, and interesting enough, it really goes hand in hand with our HMH curriculum.
And I'm Dana Hendrickson, South Valley, second grade teacher. And along with some of the things Dr. Tate had said about how we're trying to provide a calm, safe, mindful, welcoming environment. Recently, Kate Morgan, third grade teacher, and Sydney Perman, art teacher, along with the help of James Heiser, we were able to figure out a way to write a grant to see if we could control the lighting in our classrooms, to see if that brings any sort of effect onto behavioral issues, mindfulness. And we recently received some of the battery operated lamps because we cannot control the lighting otherwise. And I had mine on in the classroom for the first time. And the first thing one little girl said was, "It feels so safe and calm in here." And they just begged, "Can we do math by," they call it romantic math, math by candlelight. And so we just are trying to put it on at different times in the day when they are really hyped up, and right after recess and things, just to see if it brings everyone's levels down. And teachers are walking by saying, "It's so calm in here, it's so homey." So we're hoping that that has a positive effect on all the kids and the staff members. And we, thank the MEF for allowing us to have this opportunity.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Catherine Humes. I teach at Roberts Elementary School, and I would like to commend the Roberts staff for celebrating Autism Awareness Day which was held on Monday, April 3rd. Everyone participated by wearing their favorite color and or shirt with a kind message, kind or positive message on it. We took the pledge to help create a world where all people with autism can reach their full potential. STEM week was a huge success. Students learned about bees and pollination and pharmaceuticals. First grade went on their field trip to the Edelman Planetarium at Rowan University. The students continue to learn more about the night sky.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Can I get a motion to close public comment?
So moved.
All in favor? Anything for the good of the order? I have one thing. So we have our newest junior Quaker arrived, Easter Sunday, I believe. And so just wanted to give a strong congratulations to James and his wife, Sarah, who gave birth to James M. Heiser III on Easter Sunday. So congratulations. All the best of luck.
Congrats too. He stayed awake through this whole meeting.
And with that, could I get a motion to adjourn? All in favor?